Hello, dear story lovers. At the amount of 1,000 subscribers, I will post a huge series of special stories for you. Subscribe now. Nebulin Prime was a marvel of intergalactic engineering, a city planet where towering spires scraped against the heavens and starships darted through iridescent skies like fireflies. The Zorblat family, among the elite of Nebulonian society, lived in a shimmering EST perched on a floating platform above the planet's bustling core. Their home was a labyrinth of polished crystal hallways, glowing energy panels, and robotic attendants designed to cater to their every whim. Yet amidst the luxury and sophistication, a shadow of neglect loomed over one peculiar resident of the Zord household, Grar. Grar was a Ren Lethian hound, a breed that was considered a rare and exotic pet across the galaxy. However, Goober's rare status didn't shield him from ridicule. Unlike the sleek, graceful creatures Nebuloni preferred as companions, Grabar was an oddity. His coat shimmered awkwardly between vibrant blue and muddy brown. Depending on the light, his four floppy ears drooped unevenly, giving him a perpetually disheveled appearance. His long, double-jointed legs made his movements look clumsy and as wide. Glowing green eyes startled anyone unaccustomed to their eerie luminescence. The Zords had once seen Grar as a status symbol, a living trophy of their wealth and power. But as he grew, his ungainly features became a source of embarrassment. Soon Grabar was relegated to the farthest wing of the state, away from guests and public view. The family's busy lives took precedence, and their interest in their peculiar pet Wayne Grar spent his days wandering the mansion, his nails clicking softly against the glass like floors. His only companions were the bots that skid around, polishing surfaces and tending to minor repairs. They never spoke to him. Their glowing red eyes offered no warmth. He often sat by the panoramic windows, staring at the bustling city below, wishing for something, anything that might eff the emptiness inside him. One evening, as the Zorblat celebrated another lucrative interstellar deal in their grand dining hall, Grar paced the lower levels of the estate. He sniffed along the baseboards, drawn by an unfamiliar scent of metallic dust, and oil. His sharp senses led him to a small, unassuming door in the basement, covered in a layer of grime that hinted at years of neglect. The door was ajar, revealing the faint glow of something beyond. Grar nudged it open with his snout and stepped into a dimly lit room filled with forgotten technology. Flickering screens lined the walls, and a central device hummed faintly, a teleportation pod. It was unlike anything Gar had ever seen. Its surface, etched with alien runes that glowed faintly in response to his presence. Curiosity overwhelmed him. He patted closer, his glowing green eyes reflecting the light of the runes. His paw accidentally brushed a series of buttons on the pod's control panel, and the machine roared to life. The room filled with a rising hum as energy surged through the pod. Bark's ears perked up in alarm, but before he could retreat, the machine enveloped him in a cascade of shimmering light. In an instant, Grabar was gone, leaving behind the quiet hum of the Zorad estate. The teleportation pot powered down, its glow fading back into darkness. As if nothing had happened upstairs, the Zords continued their celebration, blissfully unaware that their peculiar unwanted pet had just embarked on an adventure that would change not only his life, but the fate of the galaxy itself. The first thing Gar noticed was the air. It was thick with the scent of life, earthy, sweet, and sharp all at once. The stark sterility of Nebulin Prime was nowhere to be found. Gart blinked, his glowing green eyes adjusting to the golden light of twin suns that hung low in the lavender sky. Around him stretched an alien landscape, a rolling meadow of crimson grass dotted with colossal trees, whose branches spiraled like corkscrews toward the heavens above. Strange bird-like creatures with translucent wings hovered and chirped in harmonious melodies. For the first time in his life, RAR felt small, but not insignificant. He was part of something vast, mysterious, and vibrant. Tentatively, he patted forward, the crimson blades of grass brushing against his legs. His drooping ears twitched at every sound, the rustle of wind through the alien trees, the distant thrum of an unseen river, and the occasional crackle of small creatures darting in the underbrush. Despite his loneliness, the spark of curiosity burned within him. The sun-dappled path eventually led him to a clearing where he encountered his first inhabitants of this strange world. Violins, these creatures were unlike anything Gar had seen before. They were small, barely reaching his shoulder, with fur that shimmered like liquid silver under the light of the twin suns. Their wide eyes glowed faintly purple, and their faces bore expressions of wonder rather than fear as they watched the newcomer. One of the violins, a youngling with a curious tilt to its head, approached. Gar's movements were cautious, but not hesitant. It chirped in a series of musical notes, a language that Bar couldn't understand, but instinctively felt was welcoming. The youngling reached out a clawed hand, and Grar, after a brief hesitation, lowered his snout to meet it. The touch was warm, and in that moment something inside Bearer softened. The other violins gathered closer there, chirps harmonizing into a melody that seemed to resonate with the landscape itself. One of them, an elder with F streak and shades of gold, stepped forward. It steadied Gark for a moment before letting out a low guttural hum. The sound reverberated in the air, and Grabar felt a strange vibration ripple through his body. It wasn't unpleasant. If anything, it felt like a greeting, a connection. The elder gestured for Gark to follow, and the group led him through the forest to their village, nestled at the base of a towering crystalline mountain. The village was a marvel of organic architecture. Homes were woven into the giant trees, their walls glowing faintly with bioluminescent moss. Bridges of braided vines connected the structures. Swaying gently in a breeze, the violin brought Grar to a central gathering area where they offered him food. Small blowing fruits that tasted like a mix of sweet nectar and earthy spices. Grabar ate the Verulin's watched with a mixture of fascination and joy. He wasn't sure what he'd done to earn their kindness, but he felt something he had never experienced before: acceptance. Days turned into weeks, and Grabar slowly adapted to life among the Verulins. They taught him to fish in the crystal-clear rivers using his sharp senses and keen reflexes. They showed him how to climb the corkscrew trees to reach their glowing fruit, and introduced him to the art of weaving vines into tools and shelters. Grar's odd features, so ridiculed on Nebulin Prime, became assets. Here his 4 ears caught the faintest sounds of predators lurking in the shadows, and his double-jointed legs gave him speed and agility to evade them. For the first time in his life, Grar felt like he belonged. The Violins didn't care about his strange appearance. They valued his spirit, his eagerness to learn, and companionship. He offered they gave him a new name, Griller, which in their language meant the Radiant Wanderer. But as much as Gar thrived in his new world apart, him couldn't shake the lingering shadow of his past. Why had the Zords cast him aside? What had he done to deserve their neglect? The questions gnawed at the edges of his newfound happiness. Like F echoes in the back of his mind, his days on Valia were filled with joy, but his nights were haunted by dreams of the glassy halls of Nebulin Prime and the cold stares of the Zords. As much as he tried to leave that life behind, it seemed the galaxy wasn't done with him yet, and neither was his destiny. The crash came at dawn, just as Valia twin suns crept over the horizon. Grar was by the river, his 4 ears twitching at the gentle trickle of water and the rustling of early morning life in the forest. Then a deafening roar tore through the skies. The sound was like nothing he'd ever heard, metal grinding against itself, accompanied by an explosion of flames that painted the lavender sky with streaks of orange and black. He spun toward the noise, his glowing green eyes locking on a plume of smoke rising above the treetops in the distance. Instinct told him to run, but something deeper, curiosity, duty, or perhaps the spark of bravery, urged him forward. Within minutes, he reached the edge of the Verilon village. The elder, flanked by other villagers, stood gazing at the smoke in the distance. They chirped and hummed among themselves, their tones filled with concern. Gart barked urgently, his guttural sounds catching their attention. He gestured with his snout toward the smoke and took a step forward. The elder hesitated, then nodded. A group of younger Violins joined him, armed with spears fashioned from crystal-tipped vines. Together, they set off toward the crash site. The journey took hours, the terrain growing steeper and more treacherous. As they neared the source of destruction, Grar's 4 ears picked up faint cries, voices garbled, but unmistakably Neblonian. He broke into a sprint, the Verilon following close behind. Finally, they emerged into a clearing and saw the wreckage of the ship. Sleek and unmistakably Nebuloni lay in ruins. Its once glimmering hull was scorched and twisted half, buried in the crimson grass. A faint hell of failing energy resonated from the remains of the ship, and the accurate smell of burning circuits filled the air around the wreckage. Several figures in torn Nebuloni and uniform staggered, coughing and clutching at injuries. The sight of the Nebuloni sent a jolt through Gark. They looked just like the Zorblat Stall, elegant and pristine, even in their disheveled state. These weren't his neglectful owners, but their resemblance was enough to stir conflicting emotions within him: anger, fear, and a strange lingering loyalties to the people who had cast him aside. The Nebuloni spotted the approaching group and froze. Their wide, luminescent eyes darted between the towering hound and the silver fur Velen's, panic written on their faces. "Stay back," one of them SH'd, raising a weak hand. "We mean no harm." The elder Verilon stepped forward, humming a low, matic tone that Grar recognized as a gesture of peace. The Nebuloni didn't understand, but their fears seemed to subside when they saw the elder's non-threatening posture. Grar took the opportunity to approach one of the injured Nebuloni, a young female, clutching her arm, which was badly burned. She flinched as he came near, but relaxed when he gently nudged her hand aside to inspect the wound. Without waiting for permission, Grabar barked to the Velens, signaling them to fetch healing leaves and water from a nearby river. The younglings dashed off, and returned quickly presenting the materials to Grabar, who had watched the Verilon healing rituals many times awkwardly. But effectively he applied the pus, earning a surprised look from the Nebuloni. And woman, you're helping us, she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. Over the next several hours, Gar and the Verilons worked tirelessly to tend to the injured and salvage what they could from the wreckage. As they worked, the Nebuloni began to speak their arrogance, melting into gratitude. They explained that they were explorers from a rival family to the Zorits tasked with surveying uncharted planets for potential colonization. The ship had been hit by a rogue asteroid field, and they had been forced to make an emergency landing. You saved us, the Nebuloni and woman said, her gaze fixed on Bar. I don't know how to thank you. Brar simply wagged his tail, his green eyes glowing softly in the fading light of the day. As night fell, the Nebuloni huddled around a makeshift campfire, their initial mistress of the Verilon. Completely gone, they marveled at the harmony between Gar and the villagers, something they found difficult to reconcile with their own society's rigid hierarchies. One of them, a communications officer, managed to repair a small transmitter from the wreckage and sent a distress signal to Nebulin Prime. When the message was sent, the officer turned to Bar. When they come for us, he said, they'll hear about you. They'll hear about what you did for us. His voice was heavy with emotion. I've heard stories about a pet liked you from the Zorblats. They called you useless, ugly, unworthy. The word stung, but Grark didn't flinch. He barked softly, his tone firm and proud. They were wrong. The officer continued, you're more than they ever deserved. As the Nebuloni drifted off to sleep, Grabar sat by the fire staring up at the Twinamo of Valia. He knew that when the rescue ship arrived, his life would change. Once again, his actions had already set something in motion, something far larger than himself. For the first time, Grar didn't feel like an outcast. He felt like a hero. The rescue ship arrived 3 days later, its sleek, gleaming hull breaking to the lavender skies of Valia. Like a silver comet, the Violins watched from the tree line as the Nebuloni ship descended into the clearing, its landing thrusters kicking up clouds of red dust. Grar stood at the edge of the clearing, his glowing green eyes fixed on the craft. As its hatch kissed open, a delegation of Nebuloni emerged, their pristine uniforms and polished demeanor a stark contrast to the ragged survivors of the crash. Among them was a tall, imperious woman whose sharp features radiated authority, Commander Ural Zorit, the matriarch of Guber's former family. The survivors rushed to greet their rescuers, but all eyes quickly turned to the enormous, strang-looking hound standing beside them. Commander Ural's golden eyes widened as she recognized him, her mouth opened slightly in shock, but she quickly composed herself, her expression hardening. Gar, she said, her voice tinged with disbelief, what are you doing here? The Nebuloni and survivors spoke up before Bar could react, recounting the tale of how he and the Verilon had saved them. They described his quick thinking, his bravery, and his leadership in organizing the rescue effort. As they spoke, the stiff Neonian delegation began to soften their rigid postures, giving way to a murmur of astonishment. Is this true? Commander Ural asked, her gaze shifting between the survivors and Grabar. It is one of the survivors said, stepping forward. He saved our lives. If it weren't for him, we wouldn't be here. He's more than a pet, he's extraordinary. S' expression faltered the way of their words, cutting through her cold exterior. Her gaze lingered on Bearer, and for the first time, there was something in her eyes that resembled regret. But before she could say anything more, the Verilon elder stepped forward. The silver-fur leader hummed a low, resonant tone, addressing the Nebuloni and delegation. The Nebuloni and translator bot activated, rendering the words into a synthesized voice. This being the elder said, gesturing that Gark has become one of us. He is no longer defined by the neglect of his past, but by the bonds he has forged here. He is family. Tavalia, Commander Uar's lips tightened, and she glanced at the Nebuloni and delegation. The weight of public perception loomed large in her mind. Guber's story would inevitably reach the wider galaxy, and will reflect poorly on the Zorits if their abandonment of him were revealed. We thank you for your care of him, Ural said carefully. But he belongs with us at this. Grabar barked, sharply shaking his head. He turned to the elder and then back to Nebuloni, his meaning unmistakable. I belong here. The survivors stepped forward to defend him with all due respect. Commander, one of them said, he's found a place where he's valued. Maybe he doesn't need to return to Nebulin Prime. A tense silence fell over the clearing as the commander weighed her off options. The Violins stood firm, their glowing eyes reflecting solidarity. Finally, Ural exhaled and nodded very well. She said reluctantly, let it be known that Gark is no longer a ward of the Zorit family, but a citizen of Vilia. His actions here will not go unrecognized. With that, the delegation departed their pristine ship, lifting off into the lavender sky. The survivors, now healed and ready to leave, expressed their gratitude to the Verilons And Bar, they promised to share his story with the galaxy, ensuring that his bravery and newfound happiness would not go unnoticed in the months that followed. Goober's tale spread across the star's news feeds, and hollow channels across the galaxy chronicled the story of the ugly alien dog who had been neglected but found his purpose on a distant world. Grar became a symbol of resilience and acceptance, his name whispered in reverence on planets far beyond Valia. Nebulonian society, long obsessed with appearances and status, began to shift. Brar's story challenged deeply ingrained prejudices, inspiring others to reconsider how they valued those who were different. Azorts faced public backlash for their treatment of him, and even Commander Ural admitted her regret in a rare public statement. On Valia, Grabar thrived. He became a trusted guardian of the village and a beloved companion too. The Violins, who honored him as a hero, his glowing green eyes no longer drew scorn but admiration, and for drooping ears became a badge of uniqueness rather than ridicule. Years later, under the light of Valia's twin suns, Grar stood atop the crystalline mountain, overlooking the village. Around him, Verilon children played, their laughter echoing the wind in the distance. Starships occasionally passed overhead, visitors drawn by the legend of the Radiant Wanderer. As he gazed at the sky, Gar felt a deep sense of peace. His journey had taken him far from the sterile halls of Nebulin Prime, but he had found what he had always longed for, a home where he was truly seen, valued and loved, and the galaxy, once indifferent, now marveled at the hound who had shown them the true meaning of belonging.